All right, everybody. So today we have back on the podcast, Geoffrey Verity Schofield. How you doing, man?
Yeah, doing great. How about you?
I'm cold. If everybody can see, I have this huge jacket on. So I often start my day with a really large shake. It's not even. It's like maybe 300 or 400 calories, but it's got a lot of frozen fruit. So one, pretty much guaranteed at some point I will have to pause this to pee, and two, it freezes me to my core. So it could be like middle of summer, but this thing is so cold that I'm just like frozen for an hour. So that is why I have this giant jacket on right now. So we
Hide, hiding the neck gains.
yeah, right. Yeah, we'll dive into all that. So let's start with that. Let's start with my clairvoyant abilities here because it was very fun. And you know what's actually super weird? So this is like totally unrelated to this, but the day before, if like somebody asks, like almost in an annoying way, if somebody asks you a question and you just blur out an answer before they've even, like just to be funny or whatever, like just to say something before they've even answered or said the whole question. So somebody said to me, okay, so what is the answer? And I just like, again, just like 12 before they answered the question, asked the question. And then they asked the question and it was based on like, how many of this does this thing have? And the answer was 12. And I was like, and I had no idea what it was beforehand. It was just one of those weird moments, like, what the hell was that? Right. And then the next
Clairvoyance.
day, yeah, exactly. And then the next day, for whatever reason, I knew we were talking today. And I don't even know, I know you're bulking up and everything. I was just thinking, it'd be an interesting experiment if you did neck training. And I've never heard you talk about it or anything. And I sign on to Instagram and I see you with a neck harness. And it was just so bizarre. And so what made you decide to get into that?
So I don't know. I think I haven't been training for as long as you, but I've been training for like 7 years now. And
Mhm.
so, there's always has to be something that keeps you interested in training. And I just figured, my neck has been the same measurement for so long that I might as well try to train it.
Yeah.
And, I had seen a video by Jeff Nippard like a while ago on neck training. My reaction was like, huh, that's cool. I'll
Mhm.
probably do that
Yeah.
later.
Right.
Like, yeah, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go do that tomorrow. Like, it was a great video, but it just sort of, sat in the back of my mind.
Hmm.
That I watched, Alpha Destiny's videos on it.
Yep.
I'm actually chewing through his yoke playlist right now,
Okay.
and a lot of that is neck type of stuff. And then Josh Brett came out with a video where he trained his neck for 100 days straight, and
Mm.
he went from like 15 and a half to like 16.75 or something over
Okay.
the course of 100 days, which is pretty
Huh.
good going.
Yeah.
And, I just figured it would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. So I know you've now, I think, seen my videos on it. So I started back in 2017. And it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, I definitely don't have this really big neck, but it's now, I would say, proportional. So I started with a 15 and a quarter inch neck at 190 pounds. And now it's gotten up to close to 17. This is at the Adam's apple. Obviously, at the base, it's bigger.
Yeah.
But at the Adam's apple, it got up to close to 17. But I had also gone from like 190 to 205. So for me, I always say you got to check at the same weight or body fat because obviously
Yeah.
like our arms could grow as much as we want if we gain 40 pounds,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you got to compare across like a certain body fat. And so at that point, I mean, by 2017 I had already been lifting like 12 years or something. So to have an inch growth anywhere, it was great. I'm like, okay, this is
Yeah.
actual progress. I first tried it with bands connected to the harness, and that was, I want to say, 1 or 2 months, and I didn't notice anything. And I was actually about to give up. I was like, oh, just this neck training is not working for me. And I don't know if it was due to the ineffectiveness of the bands because I was going to failure and close to failure. And it actually felt good. It felt smooth. I basically had the bands connected to the door
Yeah.
and then the harness. So I don't know if it was the ineffectiveness of bands and how the tension was put on the muscle, or if it's just because it was my first month or two of neck training. So I was developing, again, that neurological adaptation to something new before the muscle growth really kicked in. I don't know. But almost all of the size increases came in 6 months, and then pretty much all of it within a year. I have to say, I've continued to do it. I've tried to find different ways to progress with the side variations and different volumes.
Yeah. You said
Go ahead.
that, yeah, you said that you kept gaining strength, but you didn't notice any size. And like that
Yes.
was the only muscle group that you've ever noticed. Like if
Yeah.
you put on biceps strength, you're gonna like curling strength, you're gonna put on bicep
Hmm.
size. But
Yeah.
like you seemed like very sort of astounded and perplexed as like the strength is still going up, but
Yeah.
there's like no difference at all in the measurement.
Especially so the neck flexions have been a little bit more constant, and maybe that's like I can't cheat as much, so I lie on my back and I just really try to go strict and I go, up and down like
Yeah.
that. With the neck extensions, I don't know if it's because maybe upper back is taking over, but I mean, I stay pretty
Yeah.
constant form. I mean, I'm up and I go down here and then I come up, and I don't, cheat or anything. Obviously, with something like neck, I'm not gonna be like up, shooting all over the place.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's very odd, but I mean, literally like a 50% increase in the weight for the same reps, and it didn't go up. And it's like I said, or like you said, no, I have
Yeah.
no other examples like that where I've gotten
Yeah,
that
I've
much.
never even heard of that. Like I can't
Yeah.
imagine a client, putting 50% weight on their squat with the same technique and everything and
Mhm.
just not seeing any quad growth or glute, like nothing.
Yeah,
There's nothing
especially
happening.
for such a isolated movement. Like you could imagine maybe like a deadlift. Like I put 100
Yeah,
pounds on my deadlift in 1 year, but I switched to sumo. There were
right.
technique, stuff like that.
Yeah,
But this is, I
the
mean, you're
timing. Yeah,
right, right. So yeah, it's very interesting. Have you remeasured? Well, no, it's only been like a week for you, right? So
yeah, it's yeah,
yeah.
it's only been like a week, but the strength gains have been pretty impressive. I got the harness and I've done it for 2 sessions. The first session I did 10 kilos, so like 22 pounds
Mhm.
for 10 reps.
Okay.
And the back of my neck was pretty sore because
Yeah.
I did just everything to failure and then beyond failure. One of the Instagram videos was me going to failure, like, and
Yeah. 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 Well,
then
I
like doing partials because you're stronger down here it seems. So I just went to failure and then did a little bit of like head
yeah.
banging, and then today I did the same weight that I got for 10 reps, and the first rep I was like, oh shit, that was easy. Like it just
Uh-huh.
felt like nothing, and I got
Yeah.
25 reps.
Okay. Nice.
So yeah, 15
I
extra reps in 2 days.
Let me see if I'll see if I can find it. Yeah, so when I describe it, I do tell people like don't go to failure because it's neck training. But to be honest, I do. I'm pretty comfortable
Yeah.
with it. I've at most strained it a little bit. And when I've done that, I just make sure I stop. It's not something that like I push through at all.
Yeah.
And then that's it. So let's see.
My instinct would be,
Go ahead.
yeah, my instinct would be like if it's a 20 rep max to failure controlled, I don't see how that would be really much of an issue, especially if it's like a progression that you've been doing.
Mhm.
But it's like I wouldn't do a 3 rep max or something like that, or a 5 rep
Yeah,
max.
well, yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing.
There's just no point, right?
I pretty much always will do 20 plus reps. Like I wouldn't even bother going like anything below 10, I would say. And even that could be a little questionable.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find the roughly like a year in. So just as an example, when I started, I just went light 25 pounds. Like this is like my first session ever, 25
Yeah.
pounds for 15 reps. And then a year later, I was doing 30 pounds for 44 reps. So obviously a little bit heavier and like more than double the reps. But now I can do 45 pounds for like 40 reps. So it literally is like a 50% increase in the weight for the same reps. And it didn't really grow anymore. So like I said, it's possible that, I don't know, maybe upper back muscles took over. I really don't believe the form change, but it's interesting. I mean, obviously you're not going to get like a 20-inch neck if you're like 180 pounds, right? I mean, unless you're like a super freak, like it's still going to be proportional to weight, like everything else. Because you're now up to, you said 215, right?
Yeah, about 215. Usually when I hear a neck measurement, and this goes with a lot of different measurements,
Mm-hmm.
you can measure it in a way where you get extra inches for free. Like if I measure around near
Yes.
the base,
Hmm.
I already have 20 inches. And if I go like way
Wow.
low and get, because my traps insert
Right.
just stupidly high. I don't even,
Yeah.
like I had traps before I ever touched a weight.
Yeah.
When I was running like 80, 90 miles a week, I could not get rid of these fucking traps. Like they just wouldn't, they wouldn't
Yeah.
fucking disappear. Um, and so, if I measure around the base and get the upper trap meat involved,
Right.
it's like 20 inches
Yeah.
already.
It's
But
very
but the
hard.
actual neck is like only 16 and a half.
Yeah, you have to be honest with yourself about it because I noticed mine is definitely not 20, but I would get close to like 18 when I was heavier, like at the base, but then, like maybe 16 and a half here. And then up top by like actual jaw, that's really only increased maybe 3/4 of an inch. I mean, to some degree, well, not to some degree, to a large degree, head shape and basically jaw structure will factor in to how, like, you see some people with some, I mean, I would say fairly average width jaw, but you get some people with these like huge jaw lines
Yeah.
and you're just inherently going to have a thicker neck and vice versa.
Yeah. Like I think that goes with a lot of muscle groups. You can just see some people, it inserts in a way where it's just always going to be big. Like you see Dorian Yates after like 8 months of training, he looks incredible because his lats insert like stupidly low
Mm,
near his hips, but then also stupidly high up like out in his arms.
yeah.
And so like it was always going to be a fucking big back. Like
Yeah.
you can listen to him for back training, but like he could have done a lot of stuff wrong and still gotten a fucking huge back
Yeah.
just based on his genetics and how everything inserted just because it's more, it just covers more area based on inserting in certain places.
Yeah.
And yeah, that
Yeah.
would
And I mean,
definitely be enough to.
it's so important in terms of like overall shape. And what's funny is you see that with like women as well in terms of what a lot of guys find, like a desirable female physique, right? Like I've seen women who hold like, let's say even if they're 5'5", they might hold like 150 pounds really well, even though they're maybe like thicker because they just have this like really tiny waist and, like good proportions. And I've seen other women who, like, unfortunately for them, like I seem to have six packs, but blocky waist, and it's just tough, And with guys,
Yeah.
there's like this kid at my gym who I can't imagine this kid is more than like a buck 60, but just all of like the classic insertions and everything that if he puts on 15 pounds of muscle, he could literally compete and do well because of how
Yeah.
it inserts.
Yeah. No, it's the waist size and then just how everything is put together. Like, Chris Bumstead could never work out a day in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he just has the wide shoulders and then the narrow waist. And like he could probably be like 30% body fat and just have
Yeah.
a dad bod, and he would still look decent,
Yeah.
right? Because he would just carry everything well. And other people, they're in really good shape, but they just, it's just everything is
Yeah.
proportioned a little bit differently,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And that's almost all just genetics.
Yeah.
I'll see some people and it's, they have really narrow shoulders and then like a blocky waist,
Mm-hmm.
and then they send me their goal physique, and
Yeah.
it's like this fitness model with
Right.
just the most amazing V taper, and I'm just like, no, there's nothing I can do
Yeah.
to write in your plan
Yeah.
which can not a magician, like I
Right.
can optimize your program, but no program, not even like a surgery or something or steroids is going to
Yeah.
really cause the same effect. So in that regard, genetics certainly are really, really
Yeah.
important,
Well, that's
especially at the
why
highest level.
I don't know. Like it bothers me when people say like, oh, well then just do this. Like for instance, like with the wide waist thing, right? So like I'm fortunate in that I have wider shoulders, but I also have a wide waist. And some people will say, oh, well, who cares if you have a blocky waist? Just get bigger lats, get bigger shoulders. And it's like, yeah, but proportionally, it's always still worse than if you had a narrower waist, right? And same thing, like you could say, with you, like I think you said that you have you do have a very tiny waist, relatively speaking, but I think you have like a narrower upper torso and shoulders, right? Like relatively, is that right?
Yeah. So I haven't measured like my clavicles or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I've seen some people who just clearly have, significantly broader shoulders.
Yeah. Well, it was really
So the
interesting
only thing
when,
making the only thing giving me a V taper is the small waist.
well, yeah, which
Without
I
that,
was shocked by how tiny yours was, because you sent me a picture, which was definitely the
ew.
softest I've seen you. And it was like, I don't know what you would put your body fat at, but I would have said, I don't know, like 20% or so. What do you think?
Yeah, no,
Eh,
spot on. I would say 20%. I did a video saying I'm 20% and that's okay. Because like
yeah,
apparently for a lot of people in the fitness industry, it's like, oh my God, the minute you're over 15%, it's like
yeah.
you're a criminal, etc.
But you still
And
have like almost a 32-inch waist in the morning, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy,
But
dude.
I didn't realize how special that was because I always
Oh
thought like
yeah.
30 was like typical.
Uh-huh.
I was just figured like it was just normal. And
Yeah.
so anything below 30 is bonus points and anything above 30 is like not good.
Right.
And so yeah, I didn't realize that until like I actually, talked to more people and got
Yeah.
more
No,
into it.
man. I
So you
have
don't
to
realize.
get like a full-on six-pack to get a 32-inch waist. I know Lane Norton. Now he's particularly blocky. When Lane's like
Yeah.
contest lean, he still has, I think, like a 32 to 33-inch waist, he says.
Yeah.
I think Abel also had about a 32-inch waist at 180. So to be like 215, 20% body fat, I mean, that's ridiculous to have the waist at 32.
Yeah. I didn't realize like um I measured with a vacuum at like 26. And so my goal is to get equal sized legs and vacuumed abs
Upper
when
thighs.
lean. Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow.
I hit 26 today. So but when I diet down,
Thighs.
they'll yeah, thighs. But when I diet down, I'll probably lose an inch. So I'll need to get 27
Hmm.
at least.
Where do you measure
Um,
the thighs?
yeah, so I do measure pretty high. If I measure exactly in the middle, it might be half an inch less,
Hmm.
maybe three-quarters of an inch less. But that's just where I've always measured it. So I try to
Yeah.
keep it consistent. But I think the standardized way of measuring it, and that's the thing, like for the biceps, it's obvious, like, oh, just measure at the
Right.
biggest point. Like no one's gonna measure halfway up and
Yeah.
shortchange themselves, right?
Right. Right.
Um, if anything, you like most people will try to like go sideways or something
Yes.
to like I've seen
Yeah.
some sideways measurements on camera.
Hmm.
But for the thigh, I'd always measured like maybe three-quarters of the way up,
Yeah.
um, just to get some adductor involved.
It's it's very hard to be consistent with thighs, because I've taken, like, I was thinking about it with arm measurements, and I'm like, okay, so with my arm measurements, I've literally measured my arms since I was starting. So, like, let's say 13 years old, right? And I've taken them on average at least once a week, probably more than that. And I'll take it a couple times, whatever. I mean, I've literally wrapped that thing around my arm thousands of times, and
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
quite consistent with it. With thighs, like you said, and it depends on, like, if I'm very lean, my upper and mid thigh is not a huge difference. There's clearly always a difference, but obviously you put fat on your thighs and like more upper thighs and glute area. So the heavier I
yeah,
get, the bigger the difference. And so because of that reason, I do often measure at the top, but I'll still, for the sake of, I don't know, I guess what's probably more like reality in terms of more like the muscle mass and where the belly is, I try to do the middle as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think anywhere that you get thighs, if you're getting the same measurement, waistline and thighs, that's pretty insane. My
yeah. The reason, yeah, the main reason I measured pretty high was just because, like, if I measured in the middle, then like, oh, and then I measured slightly higher up, I would get
Yeah.
like a quarter of an inch bigger, and then
Hmm.
it's like, oh, I measure a quarter of, so I just measured it like whatever got me the
Right.
biggest measurement, and then just stuck with that
Hmm.
because that was it would be like measuring, you know, not in the middle of the biceps, but like slightly out. You
Hmm.
just want to go for the highest. That's just
Yeah.
it was mostly just to be consistent because I noticed that, if I measured just haphazardly, because
Hmm.
how do you measure exactly halfway?
Right.
You would have to like get a tattoo
I
around your
literally joked
fucking
about that before. I
thigh.
remember thinking like I would get a pen and just forever have a pen line. I'm not even kidding. Like when I was in high school, I remember thinking, how am I going to take these measurements? That's funny. But yeah, at one point I was up to 27 inches, and uh, obviously body fat was fairly high at that time. Now I think I just measured them at like, I mean, again, I'm like low 180s right now. So I think I measure them at the top at like 25 and a half. So, but I mean, it varies quite a lot with my body weight, obviously. Um, but yeah, it's I don't know how long, like if your limbs are particularly long. This is a topic Abel and I've talked about quite a bit though, where we're the same height, but my limbs are much longer. And so even when I had 27-inch thighs and was squatting in the 400s, they didn't look small. My thighs themselves looked okay, but I had a buddy whose thighs measured probably 2.5 inches smaller. And we would like look in the mirror and it was like laughable. Like his would just like dominate mine from like a bodybuilding perspective. Because
shorter or
he was shorter, yeah, and his
yeah,
thighs were. I mean, he was shorter, but even proportionally, his legs were proportionally smaller or like shorter.
shorter, yeah,
And yeah, my
yeah,
brother
yeah.
too. My brother has these. I don't know. Well, he gets them from my dad, I guess. He has these meaty legs. He literally hasn't worked out in like years, and his legs would just like dwarf mine if you put any effort into them.
Yeah, no, I've that. I mean, limb length and proportion can definitely make a big difference. And then also, yeah, just some people just they have decent sized legs, but they just have no quad sweep.
Hmm.
It just doesn't sweep outwards at all. Like
Yep.
there's just not a lot of shape to the outside of the leg.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously, like in terms of bodybuilding, you know, the cuts and the striations and the vascularity, and then like if you get a teardrop as well, you can turn like a shit leg into a pretty decent looking leg if you just
Hmm.
build a little bit of teardrop
Yeah.
muscle, and it might not even contribute to size because it, you know, local hypertrophy, we know that's a thing because muscles are not ropes, and so zing, and so you know if you get a little bit of just teardrop buildup, it might not actually impact your leg size when you measure it, but
Yeah.
it'll look way.
So let's talk about your diet a little bit that you've gotten up to. Because what did you have you been gaining for like years, or did you previously have a cut and then you went up?
So I'll actually just check my spreadsheet. Basically, um, from I cut from January to like June this year. Um,
Okay.
just no reason in particular. I just, you know, kind of wanted to get lean for the summer, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Before that, I hadn't really cut for a while. COVID kind of messed things up, and um, I mean, I lost weight during that time, but it wasn't fat.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I somehow managed to lose weight while getting less lean, which was
Mm.
so I gained fat while losing muscle and losing weight,
Over
even with
COVID?
like yeah, even with during like 3 or 4 months of pretty strict quarantines here.
Mm.
So, you know, I could do like dips and pull-ups,
Yeah.
but my legs shrunk a ton. I was still running a lot, but actually that probably had something to do with
Yeah.
losing leg size because that definitely doesn't help at all.
Right.
Um, and then this has been one of the longer sustained bulks that I've had. 2019, I couldn't really eat as much because I was broke. So that and I was just, you know, working a bunch of jobs. So
Yeah.
that did not help with gaining. And so this has been, you know, probably the longest consistent caloric surpluses that I've had in the past, you know, 4 or 5 years.
And that's just since this past June?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
June to November.
That's really not that long, right? I mean, you're
No,
still
yeah, it's
only
not like
talking.
if I had a client, I would tell them to gain way more slowly because
Yeah.
I'm up like almost 30 pounds
Yeah.
in 5 or 6 months, which, oh yeah, like if a client was doing this, I'd be like, put the fork down.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'd be telling them to chill and pump their brakes. Usually it's like, you know, a pound or two a month or something,
Right.
like just much more controlled. Um, but you know, I cut pretty hard and I bulk pretty hard as well. And it just seems
Yeah.
to work better for me. Um, and I haven't really gone above 20% body fat. I've actually sort of leaned out the past 2 weeks without trying at all.
Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned that I think
yeah.
I don't know if it was because you were a little lax with the diet or what
Yeah, I
happened
just
there.
wasn't. because you get sick of the same food. So it's
Mhm.
like, pizza and cheesy bread is going to be what gets in the calories.
Yeah.
But then like you're sick of that. You've been eating it so much. And so you go for, the healthy option with the
Hmm.
fiber and you just get full and then it's,
Yeah.
it's off. And then the scale goes down and you're like, well, I need to be more disciplined with things. So,
Yeah. Well, it's
resolve
funny.
to go back to days of cheesy bread and
I was gonna
pizza.
say more disciplined being going back to eating shit food.
Yeah, it's a tough life, but it
Yeah.
is what it is.
Do you
Gotta-
your diet's interesting because you were mentioning to me just from a time efficiency standpoint, you pretty much have liquid calories most of the day. And then around your workout and like later in the day, you actually eat a couple like real meals.
yeah. Greg Doucette hates me for a reason. My diet is like probably the the antithesis of what he would actually promote.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot of liquid calories. It's not a lot of chewing. It's just I get in the calories, and then I'm my training is pretty hard, and I do get in like 10,000 steps a day.
Mhm.
I actually edit when I walk, so I walk for an hour after training, and
Okay.
that's when I edit my videos, just walking around and
From your
editing on my
phone?
phone. Yeah. I
You gotta
know.
show me how to do that, man. Because I mean, I don't do much editing. So all the like, because your videos are fairly well edited, you do that just from your phone?
Yep.
What kind of phone do you have?
Shitty Xiaomi Note 3. It's not. I need to get a new phone. It's cracked so many times
What do
just
you
from me
use to
dropping
edit?
it.
Like, is that
KineMaster. Yeah.
Kind Master? We'll talk at a podcast. I gotta figure that out.
Yeah. It's good.
Interesting. Yeah. There's definitely something to be said for the variety with food, right? I mean, this is a well-known thing. Like when people have more options, they eat significantly more, ranging from on an acute basis, right? Like if you're at a buffet, you're just more likely to eat a lot more than if there's like two options available. But then also like longer term, people who, for instance, obviously a lot of the reasons that these restrictive diets work is simply because they limit your options. And
Yeah.
I've noticed recently I'm only finished dieting and have been working with Steve for like we just finished week 4 and or no, we're in the middle of week 4. But anyway, and I'm already like my hunger is much lower, obviously, just with eating more. But I haven't had the same like food obsession. But I've just recently been on this Indian food kick. And I think it's just because it's something that like I never really had before. Like I'm Italian, I've had infinite amounts of Italian food growing up, and then obviously all the standard things that Americans eat, Chinese food and whatever. So this is like a new type of food to me, and I've literally gotten it. I think I've gotten it 10 times in the last 3 weeks, not exaggerating, because it's like, oh,
Wow.
what is this? What is this? And so I'm still keeping it within the calories and everything, and I'm still weighing stuff, but it's just that variety definitely brings something to the table.
Yeah, I think that's why when I'm cutting, I'll just have the same thing
Mhm.
basically the same thing every single meal when I get. I'll just order the same like rice and chicken breast
Mhm.
and broccoli. No,
Mhm.
it's not broccoli. It's like some other peppers or some vegetable, but like
Yeah.
it's the same, just basic meal with some carbs, some fats, some proteins, and
And when
then
you're that
I
hungry,
won't
it's
really
still
vary that.
enjoyable though.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. That's actually part of the reason why I like bulking and cutting, because the bulk primes the cut and the cut primes the bulk. So when you
Yeah.
bulk up, like right now, my hunger is pretty negligible,
Mhm.
um, because I'm far above my set point, and when I cut, it would actually be a nice thing. Like it's kind of a relief
Yeah.
to not have to eat so much food, and then at the end of a cut, well, shit, everything tastes good, and like appetite is way up and hunger is way up, and you can just ride that out, and so they almost like work very synergistically.
Yeah.
And I think main gaining can work, um but I don't think it would be all that much better than like this kind of bulking
Yeah.
and cutting approach. Plus, like I just don't like carrying that much weight in the summer anyway. It gets so hot here
Yeah.
that I'd rather be leaner, but in the winter, like having some fluff is nice.
Yeah. Well, that's something I talked about before, and we'll get into like the maintaining bit because one of my arguments against, like I kind of said, once you're kind of done with like the natty gains, there's an argument to be made to just kind of main gain or whatever, maintain, because a lot of the year I found myself, okay, so like if I'm bulking for 9 months and I'm cutting for 3 months or whatever it takes, then at least half the year, I'm either more full than I want or I'm more hungry than I want. And I'd rather just
Yeah.
have like a happy medium. And for me, like 190 to 195 is a really nice balance where food is still enjoyable, but I can also kind of go away and eat whatever I want if I'm on like a trip or whatever and make it up in like 2 days. Like the body, just because I'm not like
Yeah.
sucking in everything. So it's a really nice balance for me. But my issue is less the food and more just that I just don't know if I believe much in the whole like body recomp, maintaining thing for naturals.
Yeah.
I just don't see now. I'm also not saying that like if you're far into it, you should be doing like dreamer bulks because I've done that too. And like it just didn't net a lot at some certain point. But I do think for most naturals, I mean, really just for most people, I think you need a dedicated period of time towards what that goal is. And I don't think
Yeah.
it's as simple as like, well, I'll be in a surplus for this day and then I'll be in a deficit for this day. I think muscle growth takes a long time and a
Yeah.
concerted effort over months, you know?
Yeah. And it takes a lot of energy as well. I think people underestimate just how much energy it actually costs to synthesize muscle.
Mhm.
It is significant. It is quite a bit. And, you know, it will definitely slow down progress trying to maintain too lean of a physique or just not eating enough. There's a lot of people who think they're main gaining when they're really like maybe in a deficit
Mhm.
or like they're just not getting in quality sessions because they're afraid to eat. And I think a lot of people do conflate dreamer bulking with lean bulking.
Mhm.
And like you can have that happy medium where you're just gaining weight slowly, enough to synthesize muscle tissue at a pretty good rate. And even fat gain, it's usually not that excessive. If you look at overfeeding studies, you can eat in a surprisingly massive surplus. And a lot of these guys are not gaining a whole lot of fat. They were in like 1,000 calorie surplus or more per day. And the
Mhm.
fat gains were not ridiculous. I mean, they were noticeable. They were much higher than the smaller surplus group, from what I recall. But it wasn't like a massive amount of fat. And the way I look at it is that fat loss is relatively easy. I mean, some people might think it's difficult, but compared to muscle growth, fat loss is very, very fast and very, very easy. So if you gain fat in the process of optimizing muscle growth, that can be cut off relatively quickly, as long as you're willing to cut back on the food intake, especially if you're active, if you have a lot of muscle mass, if you're prepared to put in, extra steps. And, so going on a mini cut occasionally can cut out any of that extra fat you gain. And so, as long as it's not like 30 or 40% body fat that you're going up to,
Mhm.
I don't really see the issue with it. And in terms of health, I mean, 20% body fat is not going to be remarkably worse than 15%. On the video I did, some people were like, well, yeah, you sacrificed your health to get to 20%. Did I though? Did I though? Like, I don't know, man. Blood work is perfect. I can still run, well under a 7-minute mile and everything. And so like my resting heart rate is still 45 or 50 or something. And
Right.
so,
Yeah. So that's great.
yeah, so I don't think it's really detrimental to health. And I think the positives outweigh the negatives, at least in my case.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I'd caution people with the overfeeding studies is like they're generally shorter term. And so you have a little bit
Glycogen.
of like, yeah, I mean, you have a reservoir, right? Okay, some is going to go towards water, glycogen, things like that. Also, there's pretty huge individuality there where if you
Yeah.
look at some people, they actually, there, I've seen people where the NEAT goes down even in
Yeah.
response to overfeeding, which is wild. Like that just
Yeah.
sucks. And then vice
Yeah. Yeah.
versa.
That's where I think it's important to know yourself. Like I know that I can get away with a sizable surplus, but not everyone can. Like if I had someone who used to be fat, they used to be, very, very high in body fat percentage, I would be much more cautious and conservative when bulking, just
Yeah.
because it's likely that their P ratio is not going to be great. They're going to store fat more easily. Um, and or if someone is like they used to be skinny fat even, I would say that's probably also an indicator that they should proceed fairly cautiously.
Yeah.
So it really is pretty individual. Like I know myself, and I know that like if I do gain a little bit of fat, I hold it well, and I've bulked and cut. Looks like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 7 times over the
Yeah.
past seven or so years. So for me, it's worked pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. The only other thing I'd comment also is that, like, when I've given this story before, but when I was, geez, this was 2000 and, oh my God, I'm feeling old, man. This is 2011. So this is 10 years ago. And I probably had about 10 to 15 pounds less muscle than I do now. And I cut down to 170, and I was like, you know what? Like, okay, this is pretty lean. I'm just gonna bulk up to 175, cut down to 170, and just kind of repeat this, hoping to like be a better version each time. And I did
Yeah.
that for like 6 months, and I literally went nowhere. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
No,
like
if you're
in what's
yeah.
up? Yeah,
If
like
you're
in
too lean, this
theory,
won't work. Yeah.
I don't even think it was the leanest thing, because some people have said that and they're like, oh, but like I wasn't that lean. I mean, I was lean, but I was like beach lean. I really
Okay.
just believe it was just not enough dedicated time. It was like, a month, maybe like 2 months of like slowly going up to 175 and then a month down. And I know some people, they do it, and you could say
Yeah.
maybe there's like a genetic component. I don't know, but I really think you got to put in months and months and hit new highs. Like you're right now, you're
Yeah.
hitting a new lifetime high, right? Steve Hall was a good example of that. He never let
Yeah.
himself get up to 200 plus pounds. And now look at the results,
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. And you want that momentum. And this is where I think mini cuts are okay to like maybe clean things up if you find you're getting too fat
Mm-hmm.
for your own taste, or just, in terms of percentages. But, I do see some people, they do that 5 pound up and down approach. And especially, I think leanness does have something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a
It'll
lot
go
of it is
factor.
just it's just the momentum. Like you can't get any traction. And then now you're in a deficit and your bench is fucking stalled.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, now you're in a surplus and like you're gaining a little bit, but then like, you've lost all your momentum there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I 100% agree. When I see people on social media who like are constantly, oh, it's a 3 week bulk and then a 2 week cut and a 3 week, I'm just like, what the fuck? Like this would
Yeah.
never ever, I would never ever see progress like that. You do want like that sustained. I think especially if you're natural.
Yeah.
I think if you're enhanced, like you're gonna maximize all that surplus when you're in a surplus, and then when you're in a deficit, you're still fucking growing anyway.
Yeah.
Like people will grow into shows, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Like they'll be in a surplus the entire time into a show. It's just they're like, oh, 8 weeks into my diet, up 5 pounds. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What the
Well,
fuck?
there are some people are not aware of the fact that sometimes these different dieting protocols or like blasting cruises within a workout were literally tailored for enhanced
Drugs.
people based
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah,
drugs
yeah.
that they were using. And they think
Yeah,
like, oh, I should do it for this long. It's like they're doing that because their drug protocol is changing.
yeah,
So it doesn't apply to you, and I think people don't
yeah.
realize that sometimes.
There are so many things in the industry that like even because I've only been in the fitness industry for like 2 plus years,
Mhm.
maybe 3 years, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of the practices I didn't realize were just drugs.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what people, how people trained, it was just drugs. Like that was the only reason people did this, and it just sort of trickled down, through various sources.
Yeah.
And the naturals were like, well, look at this guy, like that's how it's done. Like,
Yeah.
my golly, look how big he is. He looks like, a shaved rhinoceros. If I want those kind of results, well, I guess I better do the same thing. And
Yeah.
then it just didn't work, right? Because it's a different game.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great transition into one of the topics I've seen people comment on my video. And so I just had Mike Israel on recently, and this is something that you and I talked about a little bit in the DMs. Was I do think that oftentimes, almost always, people's people will be influenced by their use of performance enhancing drugs to the point where if you were to take that same person that, in another universe they had stayed natural, and then you take that person in, current universe where they're using performance enhancing drugs for an extended period of time, I think it would almost never be the case that those two people would come to the same exact conclusions about training. I just think it's going to lead even the same conclusions about how naturals should train. I think it's just going to influence you too much, and you almost forget what it was like. And Pete Rubish, if you know him, he was on my podcast probably months ago now, but he was like, I didn't realize we were the same age, because when I was like 20, he was like blowing records and everything. He was a beast.
Oh,
Yeah, he's fairly young, and I'm 30.
okay, so wow, I thought he was older than me.
Yeah, I thought he was. Are you 30 as well?
32.
32.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's 30, I believe, maybe 31. But anyway, he was talking about how like now that he's completely come off, he's like, it is so dramatically different. I mean, it's just like things just don't work anymore. Like you just can't grow. So
Yeah.
I just think it changes your perspective too much, and you kind of forget like, oh, this stuff just like wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, no, the YouTuber Natural Hypertrophy had a video pretty flamboyantly titled "Steroids Make You Stupid," and the thumbnail was, two meme characters saying "just up trend." Like when something doesn't work, you up the trend. And I mean that's obviously a very harsh title, but I don't think it's wrong in a lot of cases. Obviously Mike knows his stuff inside and out, and he's one of my go-to sources for a lot of stuff. But I do think that in some cases it is easy to have your judgment be clouded by your own experiences. And if you're enhanced, a lot of your own experiences have been through that prism of being enhanced. And it could cloud your judgment. And if you have a platform that you're, being viewed by probably 98, 99% naturals, 97% naturals, like the vast majority of people watching YouTube videos are not enhanced. But a lot of people making YouTube videos, they are enhanced.
Right.
And so that, that divide right there is pretty significant. And yeah, I can't think of that many enhanced lifters that give good advice for naturals, like 100% of the time across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Mike's advice does apply, and a lot of it is very good, which is why I follow him, and why I respect his opinion. But there are certainly some things, like rep ranges, chasing the pump, exercise selection to a certain extent, RPE, reps in reserve, that kind of stuff, where I look at it and I'm like, I'm not sure if that really applies as much to natural populations.
Yeah. I mean, you could even, and I don't think this is why Mike does it, but you could even make an argument back to like the cycle thing of like, okay, so sometimes as people are doing a cycle, they might, I mean, obviously the blood levels of whatever you're using are going to increase throughout the weeks, right? I mean, and then if you are ramping up, let's say, okay, you're getting lower and lower RIR, you're adding more volume. Well, that happening in conjunction with increased blood levels of anabolics could make more sense compared to maybe somebody who's completely natural, just as an example. But I agree. I mean, I like Mike a lot. I'm hoping I hadn't had him on in like 2 years, so we stuck to some different topics, but I'd love to get him on next year. And because there's a few things I wrote down, including these topics that I'd like to get his opinion on. And obviously I hesitate to say too much when the person's not there to like give their counterpoints, because I'm sure he would have his own points to bring up here. But
he'd destroy me. Yeah. I don't want to debate him. Like he's an intellectual titan. He'd squash me like a bug. Like I'm just voicing my concerns from a very, very safe distance.
No, I'm very impressed with his verbal IQ. He's obviously he's up there in intelligence. So there are certain particulars though I want to bring up with him to just kind of see where he would stand on them.